Hi everyone, welcome to Business is the Chat. I am your host Mulumkheng Matipili. So the reason for Business is the Chat is to talk to entrepreneurs, to talk to people who specialize in specific fields so we can engage and share insights and network, connect, and help each other. Because from an entrepreneur to an entrepreneur, we can learn from each other. So part of what I do, I'm trying to find what challenges that entrepreneurs and people who are in different industries are going through, so we can find solutions in helping us, especially in my community, to uplift them, and most importantly, to inspire some of the people who actually want to start something but don't know how. So having this platform is so beneficial because you don't know what you can learn and take from here, and it will inspire to do your own thing. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Anton as my guest speaker for today. How are you, Anton?
Hi, Malibachang. I'm fine, thanks. And thanks very much for inviting me on the show.
It's a pleasure. So thank you for honoring my invite. So I'd like you to share with us a bit about yourself, and can you tell us about your business journey?
Sure. So I am essentially a full-time mentor and business coach and consultant in sort of business strategy and strategy development. I've got a special interest and focus on businesses that have a sort of an agenda beyond just purely a profit motive. So social enterprises, I've worked quite a lot with non-profits in the past, and I'm quite interested and intrigued by those kind of business models and getting them right. And it's probably partly because of my own background. I studied psychology, qualified or got a degree, and then decided that I didn't want to be a psychologist. I felt like I had more than enough problems of my own without spending my life listening to everybody else's. And ironically, that's kind of what I've ended up doing anyway as a business mentor and a coach. Um, and I kind of stumbled into the hospitality industry because there wasn't really much. I didn't really know what else I was wanted to do. And at the time, while I was completing my studies, I was working part-time at a hotel as a waiter just to pay for my studies and so on. And when I graduated, they approached me and said, "Do you want to be a manager?" And I said, "Well, why not? I don't know what else I'm going to do next." So I ended up working in the hospitality industry for about 7 years in quite senior roles. And it was a really good grounding for me, first of all, just to learn to work for other people. And also to work for big companies like Southern Sun and see how they kind of systematize what they do and how they create an environment for kind of replication and consistency. That was really useful from a systems perspective and exposed me to a whole host of things around, human resource management and front office management and customer relationships and that kind of thing. And then I sort of got a little bit. I kind of realized at one point that I didn't want my boss's job. The general manager of the hotel where I was at the time was a guy that I really looked up to, and he actually headhunted me for the role I was in. But I just it was like a kind of a penny drop moment for me one day. I looked at this chap, and he was in his mid 50s. He was stressed out. He was the GM of the best hotel in the world in terms of the rankings at the time. And he just wasn't having a good life and wasn't happy and wasn't inspired and motivated because his entire job consisted of putting out fires 24/7. And I kind of felt like I didn't want his job. And when I realized that, it was sort of, although I'm on this trajectory in this industry, is it actually where I want to go? And the answer was no. Unfortunately, at the time, a friend of mine um, was kind of conceiving an idea for a business, which, to cut a long story short, he asked me to join. I took a huge cut in salary. In fact, less than, I was earning less than a third that I had been earning in my quite comfortable hotel job, and took a leap of faith into this business. And we ended up opening a company called Streetwires, which was a sort of wire art and African craft business. We started with three partners working from the one partner's house, mother's house, in fact, from her dining room. And within 3 years, we'd grown the company to 120 permanent staff and exporting to 26 countries. And that, for me, was the real university. That's where I learned about business. That's where I learned about manufacturing, production, costing and pricing, all of those things that one can learn in a book, but that is so much more impactful and kind of real if you learn in real time and by actually doing. And I was the sales and marketing manager of the company, as well as in charge of the staffing. So it was a huge learning curve for me. I'd never worked in manufacturing before. It was the first time. I didn't know about costing and pricing, and I had to really learn fast. And my lessons during my 7 or 8 years with that company, I actually left the company eventually to open up a consultancy in particularly working with creative people, because I'd recognized through my 7 years or 8 years in that space that generally a lot of creative people are really fantastic at being creative, but they kind of suck at business and they're not really interested in the business side of things. So what I did was identified a gap that says, how can we make the business side of what you do, of your creative process, accessible to you and enjoyable and something that you actually can grapple with, and it's something that you can understand and engage with, because you can be the world's best artist, but if you don't have a business behind what you do, it's all going to be in vain. And I saw that a lot. So that's kind of my journey. And now, sort of 15 or 16 years later, I'm a full-time coach and mentor. I work with an amazing organization called Fatola, um, who takes a large portion of my time, and they do sort of enterprise development and personal development and supplier development programs all around the country. And I've been with them for 15 years. And I also do a lot of work for the SAB Foundation, who are doing some amazing stuff as well in enterprise and small business development across the country. And yeah, I kind of work with most organizations that are involved in this space. I'm always learning, I'm always enjoying engaging with entrepreneurs. And like I said, special focus on businesses that are not just out there to make money, but that also want to try and contribute back into their communities, whether it's through access to education, cleaner environments. So the whole social enterprise aspect is very interesting for me.
Thank you so much, Anton. So I wanted to find out, what are some of the challenges you've encountered as a mentor and a business developer?
So I think what I've realized over the years is that the quality of outcomes one gets is directly determined by the quality of input. So it's kind of like anything else in life, garbage in, garbage out. And I'm not calling any entrepreneurs garbage, but what I am saying is that certain people are more receptive to learning and able to learn and less stuck in their ways. And as a mentor or coach, part of our job is to challenge people's perceptions and to say, really, is that actually how it is, or is that just how you see it? And every now and again, you get people who just can't, they don't have the self awareness or the ability to look at themselves objectively and go, you know what, actually, the reason that my business is in the state that it's in is largely because of certain things that I'm doing repetitively that are driving me the wrong way and not propelling me forward. And so I think from a mentor perspective, it is quite a challenge sometimes when you kind of get given a client or get asked to work with a client who believes that they have all the answers and are kind of doing this just because the enterprise development program gave them a mentor or told them that they have to go and have some mentorship. Interestingly enough, I quite enjoy those and I usually take them on. It's like when the first meeting's like the person sitting like this and like, all right, what are you going to tell me? It kind of gets my juices flowing because it's like, right, here's a challenge, here's a nut that I need to crack.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be, I think one of the big shifts that we need to make as a sector that works with building businesses and helping entrepreneurs to be more successful and sustainable is that it shouldn't be that you get a prize for just rocking up. You should actually earn your place in an enterprise development program or a supply development program or any kind of a business course, whether it's at Cedar or whatever. You should tell us what you are going to contribute and what you're going to achieve if you're given that opportunity. Because there's just too much money and time and energy being wasted on entities and entrepreneurs and businesses that are not yielding a return back to the economy.
So true. I was about to ask you because I recently started off my own business. So my aspiration is to become a good strategic consultant. So I'm struggling a lot, you know. And I was reading an article and they were talking about a lot of startup companies fail because uh, they basically don't have a mentor to kind of help them get afloat, you know. So what are the what could be the problem if, besides the money factor?
I think I think part of the problem, one of the big problems, is that if you ask any entrepreneur what they need, 9 out of 10 of them will say, I need money. I need money. If I can get funding, then I can buy that piece of equipment and then I can, then I'm going to be able to produce more efficiently and then the market's going to open up and I can be more competitive. And so invariably, if you ask any entrepreneur what their core need is, they're never going to say, I need someone to guide me and help me along the way and prevent me from making, costly mistakes. They're going to say, I need money. And I always like to use an analogy that we call the leaky bucket. It's something that Catherine Weinberg, who's the CEO of Fatola, and myself kind of conceptualized and refined over the years. And if you can imagine your business is a bucket,
Mm-hmm.
and in that bucket, there's certain holes. And some of those holes might be you don't know how to quote properly. Another hole might be you not very good at managing staff. Another hole might be financial management, not really your thing. You're not interested in that. Um, and then you kind of pour water into this bucket in the form of your time and money. What's going to happen to the water in the bucket if you haven't fixed the holes? And the answer is it's going to constantly leak, and it doesn't matter how much money you put in. I've seen fundamentally flawed business models that have had millions and millions and millions of rands pumped into them that will never succeed because they haven't stopped to fix the holes. And I think part of our job as support structures, strategic consultants, mentors, coaches, etc., is to help businesses fix those holes first before, because then when the money and the energy and the time and things go into the bucket, it's going to overflow.
And so what are the I don't know. So I don't know how to put it. So from a mentor, né? What are the qualities should I, for example, look for in a mentor?
I think I think what's really important, like what I always do when I work with a new client, is I'll have an initial session where we just chat, we learn a little bit about each other, and we kind of get a feel for each other. You know, do I feel good about this relationship? Do I think that this is going to be impactful for me? Um, so I think that certainly the first thing would be, is there a rapport? You know, is there a
Mm,
connection here? Do I feel like this person can help me? I think another thing that entrepreneurs should look for in a mentor is quite often it's useful to have industry experience. So have they ever worked in agriculture, or have they had direct exposure to manufacturing, for example? That can be useful, not always. Sometimes
mhm.
it's quite good that people haven't got that experience because they don't bring baggage and assumptions into the relationship. Then it's like, okay, you say that's a problem in manufacture, but in other industries, this is how we deal with it. And then thirdly, I would say probably for me, the biggest thing that I look for in a mentor or a coach, and this is when I'm kind of either hiring one to be part of one of our existing programs or interviewing one, is that they do need to have some of their own business experience. They've got to
Mm,
have banged their heads a few times. I mean, the only reason that I feel qualified to stand up in a room full of people and kind of share my story and guide them on theirs is because I've literally made every screw up in the book as an entrepreneur. I've made mistakes. I've costed things wrong. I've handled staff issues badly. I've had dramas, a lot of them self-inflicted, and I feel like
mhm.
that's the journey that an entrepreneur will take, and as long as you learn from that along the way, it's very, very valuable. So for me, probably the first question I would ask of a mentor is, have you actually ever owned your own business? Because if the
Mm,
answer is no, they could have 100 MBAs and a string of degrees, but it's all theoretical. It's very difficult. I've found over the years that mentors and coaches and consultants with either purely a corporate background or purely a kind of academic background around business um, struggle to understand the entrepreneurial journey because they've never been in it. When you can combine the two, so you've got people who've got qualifications and they understand the theory of growing businesses, and they have some life experience themselves, that then becomes very powerful.
okay. So
So
they
even,
there's
sorry, even your journey on starting your own business now is teaching you lessons that you're going to find valuable when you work with people in the future.
in the future. So there's a question for you here.
Okay.
How do startups find information about mentors and guides, and how are you getting that information out to people know about you?
Okay, that's a good question. Um, I would suggest there's a really cool platform called Bizly, Bizly, that people can search, that puts out a lot of information about things and trends that are happening in the sector, opportunities, programs that are opening up that people can apply for. So I would suggest, start there, have a look on Bizly. I also know that there's a number of organizations. There's one called SME South Africa that's worth checking out because they also share information about that. And then there is a formal body for coaches and mentors. I, I stand to be corrected, but I think it's called Comensa, Comensa, and that's got quite a big database of consultants, mentors, advisors, business advisors, and so on. So those would be three places that I would start. And also, a lot of practitioners provide programs, and if you meet the criteria for those programs, they can often be quite good. I mean, there's a lot of programs out there that are just quite pedestrian and just ticking boxes, and it's a bit generic. But there's some really
Mhm.
good ones. I'm obviously a bit partisan, but I would say check out Fatola's website as well because currently they're busy recruiting entrepreneurs for two or three different programs in different sectors that might your listener there might find some benefit.
And then he just asked, do you offer mentorship in other provinces?
Yes. So, the beauty of Zoom and well, my last 18 months of my life have been largely remote mentoring because of obviously lockdown and COVID and all the rest of it. And that's been quite challenging. But absolutely, part of the beauty of that is that we now can work, we're not constrained by geographical limitations. And I work with entrepreneurs around the country, and I know that a lot of my colleagues and fellow mentors and coaches also, are happy to work remotely.
So how do you regulate your schedule to make sure each business you invested in gets enough attention?
Yeah, that's a good question. This Saturday that's just gone by, I was doing a strategy session on the Saturday because my clients and I couldn't find a time in the week to make it happen. So um, it is a challenge, and I do sometimes feel like personally I've spread myself a little bit thin. Um, but what I've started doing as well is I've started growing a bit of a network of people that I trust and whose guidance and advice I know is solid. And in some instances, like for example, if a particular mentee has a lot of requirements around financial management, that's not one of my strengths really. I don't find that very stimulating or exciting. But I've got someone that I work with who's really excellent at that and who absolutely loves figures. So then I will say, well, why don't you have a session with them? So it's about kind of growing a pool of a network of people that you trust, whose guidance you would be similar to your own, and in that way, one can slowly start to replicate yourself. But it's a good question, and it's a real challenge.
Yeah. And then what personal characteristics do you instill in your business?
I think for me, my sort of studying of psychology and that background has been really valuable in building my own career because I tend to start with the individual in any relationship that I engage in from a coaching or mentoring perspective. For me, it's always about, what makes this person tick? What's important to them? Do I understand them? Do they understand themselves? Before we jump straight into the business, the reality is that unless one establishes genuine trust and rapport at the outset in a coaching or mentoring relationship, I can give you the best advice in the world down the line, but you're not going to take it on board because you don't trust me. So for
Yeah.
me, I think one of the things that I bring is a recognition and an ability to develop that relationship and that rapport and that trust, and have people feel like it's a safe space when we're engaging.
So like that's like your personal style when you do your mentoring and guidance type thing.
Yes, absolutely.
And then yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, no, I was about to ask it's a next follow-up question. It's from the TikTok people. So they were asking as well, what traits have you set in the foundation of your business?
I think honesty is really important to me, and transparency. I think that being willing to always learn, and although I come into a mentoring relationship with the perception that I'm the one who's going to be giving the answers, I find that it's often a lot more impactful and powerful if you help people find the answers for themselves and you're kind of a guide and a facilitator in that process, because then you leave behind residual skills. You don't just, for me, the worst thing is that someone excels when they're being mentored, and the moment the mentorship stops, everything falls apart because you haven't left
Mm,
any skills behind. It's a good question from your TikTok folks. Another thing is that You don't ever want to, as a mentor or coach, step into the role or the space of being like a surrogate general manager or a proxy partner, as it were. Um, you always want to find, it's not appropriate for a mentor, for example, to be calling the client and having sales conversations on behalf of the mentee, because what's that saying? That's saying this person is actually too useless or inexperienced to have this conversation. So I'm going to come in and on my white horse and take over the relationship. So, there's a fine line. And I think that some mentors do struggle with that. There's a tendency to just kind of, because it's frustrating and slow, they want to just jump in and fix. But if one looks more long term, that's not usually the appropriate way to approach a coaching or mentoring relationship.
And then we have two questions for you from YouTube. So from Charlie, he says, as a mentor, what mistakes you've come across that entrepreneurs should avoid?
Okay, how long have you got, Charlie? No, I'll keep it short. Some of the biggest mistakes and the most common mistakes are number one, feeling like a client is doing you a favor when they give you an order or when you're negotiating an order. So there's a tendency for entrepreneurs, and especially when we're just starting out, to kind of go all cap in hand and all grateful and, oh, please, can I have that order? Meanwhile, the reality is that sales is a mutual exchange of value. You giving something that the client needs, and they're giving you something that you need back in the form of money. So, number one, top mistake, don't go in on a kind of a subservient level when you're engaging in sales negotiations. Be confident, don't be arrogant, but be confident. Know that people have approached you because you've got something of value to offer, and always recognize that. Don't sell yourself short. Number two, one of the biggest things that people don't get right in the beginning is terms and conditions. So when you're selling or engaging in a service or a product for that matter, make sure that when you enter into those negotiations or you supply a product or whatever it is, that you've got things like your payment terms. When do you want to be paid? What is the turnaround time? What happens if something goes wrong? Whose responsibility is it? There's a lot of very simple templates that one can download off the internet. And for me, that would be a really big one. So those two things. And then probably one more element that entrepreneurs commonly, a very common mistake, is around costing and pricing. It's an area that a lot of entrepreneurs grapple with, and it's one that I really urge you to master. You cannot sit and have a negotiation with a client if you don't know what something costs you to make or deliver. It's that simple. And they're going to squeeze you. Then they're going to say to you, well, can I get 20% off? And you're going to go, okay, but you don't actually know. So really mastering your costing and your pricing for me is a big one.
And then, what is the most important leadership lessons you've learned, and how was it proven valuable?
Okay, Charlie's full of good questions. So for me, probably the most important leadership lesson I've learned is well, there's two. There's probably two. Number one is that a true leader is never afraid to roll up their sleeves and kind of get messy. So a true leader doesn't lead from the sidelines; they lead from the middle or from the front. And I remember over my own career in the hotel industry, that there's still one manager who sticks out for me, who I would always respect. And he was a guy who, he would ask you to mop the floor, but absolutely that he would have mopped that floor himself if you were busy. And I think that for me as an employee, that's a really inspiring thing to see and to know, that no one's too important. And then I think another really important leadership trait that one needs to have is that your team needs to feel like you have their back. They absolutely need to feel like you've got their back within reason. Obviously, they can't just abuse that knowledge, but it's a really important thing for me. I don't like hierarchies where, you know, the leadership are up here and like the staff are just down there, lowly minions. And it's important that people understand that, you know, if the chips are down or if they really need help, they can feel comfortable to come to you as the owner or the leader of the organization and say, "Can you help me?"
And then I want to find out from you some of the programs that you participate in. Can you share a bit about the programs that you participate in and what challenges do you face with them? You know, because challenges are the solutions to. And oh, I wanted to please touch on how do you encourage innovative thinking?
Okay. Well, let me start with the programs. So,
Mhm.
um, I'm currently working on a couple of programs under the Fatola banner. So the sort of flagship one there is called the Tolawana Enterprise Development Program. It's funded by the SAB Foundation, so people can check it out. Every year they put out a call for new applicants for that program, and they take between 60 and 70 new businesses a year. It's an 18-month program, very intensive. It provides a full suite of wraparound support for the participants. It's like a real journey. Like you get access to training, you get access to mentorship, you get access to brand development, you get access to media and PR resources. In some instances, you get access to grant finance. And that's funded by, as I said, SAB Foundation, and it's implemented by Fatola. And it's been going now. We've been running that program for about 6 years, and it's fantastic. The growth rates and just the types of entrepreneurs we get in that program is amazing. There's another one called the Social Entrepreneurship Impact Lab that I'm working on at the moment with, and that's also a Fatola initiative, and it's supported by FNB, who are really quite big on social enterprise, which is amazing. You know, so they're wanting to support businesses that have a social benefit as well as potentially a kind of financial sustainability. And that program is also about to, or is currently putting out a call. So if your business sort of ticks those boxes, you know, do check it out on the Fatola website. Also working, there's a very big project that's about to roll out in the circular economy space. So that's really about businesses involved in sustainability and minimizing of waste and waste reduction. And that's supported by the Embassy of Finland and JP Morgan. So quite exciting as well. It's quite a new space for us, and it's an area that has a lot of potential for job creation and just for revenue generation for South Africa as an economy. And then I also work on the SAB Foundation Social Innovation and Disability Empowerment Awards as a mentor, and I've partnered with a fantastic organization called Further, who are managing that program, and that program supports a host of businesses that are innovative. To answer your next question, so that it's a sort of an awards based program where people submit their ideas and their innovations for making impact, and goes through a judging panel. I'm one of the judges on the online side of things, and what's really cool about that program is that it also recognizes and rewards people who are doing good work in the disability empowerment space. So, you know, people who are developing better mobility devices. There's some amazing companies doing work with the deaf community and people who are visually impaired. And they're coming up with some incredible innovations to improve the lives of people with disabilities. So that's a really cool program as well. So those are just some of them that I'm working on at the moment.
You got some interesting ones because I'm one on coming up with ideas, especially creating programs. But I'm like I don't know what to do with them. You know, the yes we Google play what can you do, but like it's so difficult to find the right people. So you can be like, I want to submit this. How do I go about it, or how can I use this as a good initiative? So I'm glad I met you. Now I know
So
where to go.
my advice there, Molabakeng, would be find someone who's good at implementing. If that's not your strength, if your strength is the ideas, You need to
Mhm.
partner with or find somebody who likes to actually implement stuff. It sounds kind of simple, but that part of the success of our company at Streetwires was that there were three partners and we all had different skills. My
Okay.
one partner was a visionary. He was really good at seeing the bigger picture and exactly that, coming up with ideas. Hey, let's do this. The idea for the business was his originally. My other partner was really good on the technical side of actually making the product. And I was good at implementing and kind of managing teams and getting people to move in the same direction. So my advice to you is, if you've got lots of ideas, rather than let them just die a slow death, find someone who potentially could implement or could partner with you to implement, and don't be scared to start small.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing that a lot of entrepreneurs misinterpret, is that my idea's got to be absolutely perfect and I've got to have ticked all the boxes before I can launch it into the market. And that's actually not the case. Don't be scared to
Yeah.
start small. Start from your garage. Start with one product. Start with a Facebook page, because it's amazing what grows when you actually just give it a go. Just do it. In the words of Richard Branson.
Yes, because initially when I started this thing, I was like, okay, I want to be a strategic consultant because I know I'm good with ideas, I'm good with helping people out, how to kind of like direct them in, okay, you want to do this, this is how you should go about it and whatnot, right? So I'm like, okay, it's COVID. Like, how do I go to like to people who kind of like need the help, or go to approach businesses? How do I go about it? That's when I started this whole webinar thing. I'm like, okay, let me just pull people through here so they can kind of like have an idea of what I'm doing, to also attract the people that I kind of like want to work with or get insights from. And it's kind of working to my advantage.
It's a good strategy, Molebacheng.
It is,
And
right?
yeah, and what you might also sometimes need to do is you sometimes need to give away a little to get something in return. So,
Yeah.
I've sometimes had to do like a free consulting session with a company, just so that they can understand my style and whether or not I can add value. And if they like what they see, they then would engage me further. So it is quite tricky to break into this sector, but the reality is that South Africa needs lots of mentors and lots of coaches and lots of business developers and lots of strategic consultants, because currently, 70% of our SMEs don't last beyond 2 years against a global
Yes.
average of 30%. So the truth is that we've got a challenging environment to grow and start and run a business. And all the support and help that we can provide and that we can offer is important.
Because I was about to ask you, would you advise me to kind of like now, because it's like, I'm like June, July, August, September. So I'm like 4 to 3 months in. Is it advisable that I should like kind of like start getting a mentor so I can get direction, because I'm struggling, And sometimes I sit there, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, where am I going wrong?
I think, yeah, sure. I mean, the challenge is that for most people who need mentors the most can't afford them, because
Yeah.
we're not cheap. We don't work
Mm.
for free. It's kind of like that's often a perception that it's advice, so it's doesn't cost him anything. So can't I have it for free? And the truth is that I sell time, and
Yeah.
any other mentor and any other consultant sells time, and we have to be able to sell that time in order to pay our own bills. But that said, I'm happy to mentor you once or twice. We'll have a couple of chats, and and I won't charge you, and we'll take it from there, and let's see where it goes.
Yes,
And
thank you
in
so much.
return, like I said, in return, when you're famous and everyone knows your name and your show is a household name, you're gonna remember me.
I am definitely gonna remember you. Guys, you heard it. So Charlie's back again. He's asking like similar questions that I had for you. So he asked that what do you wish you had known before starting your own mentorship programs?
Mm, I think I'd probably wish that I'd I think for me, if I could change anything or if I could work on anything, I'd probably want to improve my own understanding of financial management, forecasting, that kind of stuff. It's never been really interesting for me, and I think that I've probably skim over it a bit when I work with businesses because I feel like my approach is if you get the fundamentals right, if you've got an entrepreneur who feels passionate and motivated and strong, and he's got a good team and they've got a good product and a good service, the money will flow. And in some instances, mostly that works, but in some cases, you kind of need to drill down into the numbers and the metrics a lot closer, particularly when you're dealing with larger organizations that are looking to achieve economies of scale and very small margin but high volume type business models. You got to know your stuff with the numbers. So I kind of probably wish that I'd focused a bit more on that in my earlier career. Um,
Mhm.
and then one other thing that I wish I'd known is just to have a clearer sort of radar for people who were going to be good candidates for mentorship and those who weren't. The truth is that some people are just not, as I said earlier, they're just not good candidates for mentorship. They don't have the capacity or the this desire to change. And a
Yeah.
huge part of mentorship is about and coaching is about being willing to and receptive to changing so that you can do things better.
So I think you kind of touched on this question. Which leadership skills do you find are the most difficult to develop from your mentees?
I think I think it's finding that balance between being a boss and a leader and
Mhm.
being someone who's empathetic and a friend. That's difficult because if you go too far to the one side and you pals with all your employees, when they actually screw up, you're going to feel like, oh, I can't really shout at them. I can't actually give her a warning for not coming to work 3 times because we're friends. And then on the
Mm,
other side of that coin is someone who's so far removed from that it just feels like you working for a dictator. So I think the challenge for an entrepreneur is to find that middle ground. Be supportive, be there when they need you, but it's about business and it's about performance. And if you are going to be supportive and a good leader, you are very much entitled to expect delivery in return from your team and your staff.
so I know you need to hop off now anytime soon. So I've got like two last questions, not questions, but two things I'd like you to share with us. So, advice to your younger self. What advice you give to your younger self, and any last comments, advice to entrepreneurs, and yeah.
Okay. Advice to my younger self would probably have been start saving earlier. Um, I do save now, and I'm fairly disciplined about it. But certainly, and this is going to be similar to my advice to entrepreneurs, is to start saving from the outset, from the moment you start a business. I was when I was in the hotel industry and so on, I probably squandered a lot of. Although I wasn't earning massive amounts of money, I probably squandered a lot of it on unnecessary things that one does when you're younger. And if I'd put away 100 rand a month for 20 years, where would I be now? So that's the one thing. It sort of dovetails into my advice for entrepreneurs. One thing I always recommend to entrepreneurs that I work with is to start putting away 5 to 10% of every invoice into a sort of a slush fund or a rainy day fund. I call it a working capital fund, so that if you ever suddenly urgently need cash, if we get another lockdown and you've got 3 or 4 months of money saved up, you don't miss that 5 or 10% when you deduct it from the invoice. You don't really miss it at the time, but it soon adds up and it soon becomes something quite compelling and powerful. And for me, that's one huge game changer that I've seen when it's implemented, is just to develop that habit of saving for yourself so that you can actually end up being your own funder down the road.
Thank you so much, Anton. This was awesome. I actually learned a lot. This was so fruitful for me, especially because I was like, I'm struggling to kind of like what type of questions should I ask, because I want to get so much insight. I want also people who like tune in or people who are gonna watch this later to get as much as they can. And then somebody was just like, make it personal. You get more from making it personal than trying to figure out what someone else might need from it. So this really worked, and I'm looking
Great.
forward to talking to you again, and also having some of your people on the platform, so we can also have a nice chat, a debate, and having
Definitely.
an interactive session as well with the viewers.
For sure. Happy to come back. We'll chat
Thank you so
soon.
much. Yes, thank you guys for tuning in. I'll catch you next week. I'm going to be having another one on one session with a guy from Investec. So he's also got their own program, the CSI program for entrepreneurs. So, yeah, catch that next week, Wednesday. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
God damn. What else is space? It's